Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our very first Zoom webinar. So I hope everyone was able to get online, and I see that people are slowly getting in. So I'll talk slowly so that everyone gets a chance to log on. So we had been using GoToWebinar for our webinars previously, but as you noticed, we have recently changed to Zoom. You were adjusting to it, so hopefully you will adjust to it as well. Please note that every time before the webinar, you will be on hold until 11 a.m. So I can see people are still rushing in very, very fast. So Ronald, before we start, maybe we can just give them a few moments to settle in. And
Sure.
for everyone joining for the first time, my name is Sonia Siddiqui, and joining us today is Ronald Peters from RBC. Hi, Ronald.
Hi.
So we're really excited to have Ronald on here. You might have seen that Vivian Lee was supposed to be carrying out this presentation today, but Ronald here knows his presentation at the back of his head, so we're really excited to have him on here. And before I let him get started, I just want to make sure that everyone is properly connected. So please know that you are all on listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, please type them into the questions tab, and we'll do a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. And for best results, please use a laptop or desktop computer. Mobile devices such as tablets or cell phones may not give you the full effect of the webinar, and your feedback is always important to us. So please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. Also, if you have registered for this webinar, you will get a recording sometime later on today or tomorrow. And if you don't, just let us know, because we're still trying to test things out here. So just to tell you a little bit about ACCES, we've been around for over 30 years helping job seekers such as yourselves. We work with over 2,200 employers. We have over 30 tailored programs, such as sector-specific bridging programs, programs for youth, programs for women, leadership, entrepreneurship. Check out our website to check all of them out. We've got 6 locations in the GTA, with our newest 7th location that is up and coming in Newmarket. So if you are anywhere in the Newmarket area, contact us and we can tell you how to get started with your job search before we move there. And we've got 3 national programs and online services, such as the webinars we bring to you, and online virtual events and job fairs as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Ron here. So Ron, you can take it away now.
Sure, definitely. Thank you very much, Sonia. This is an introduction page. You can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. Okay, so just to sort of introduce myself, my name is Ronald Peters, and I'm an inclusive recruitment specialist here at RBC. Like most of you, I was once technically a newcomer, so I moved to Canada in 2009. I'm originally from the Caribbean, Southern Caribbean to be exact. I'm Trinidad and Tobago, and it has certainly been a journey so far for me, totally enjoying it. And I was once, like most of you, in that same position, you know, looking for a job and stuff like that. So I'm definitely happy to be here to share my knowledge with everyone. Just kind of just indicate a little bit of my specialty. So I work a lot with persons with disabilities as well as newcomers to Canada, trying to attract them to come into the bank. And yeah, so that's kind of my main focus. So we go to the next slide, please. All right, so for those who might not know, RBC is the largest financial services institution in Canada. We are comprised of 80,000 employees, serving 16 million clients in 37 countries. So very much a multinational corporation. Our business is divided into 5 broad segments. There's personal and commercial banking, investor and treasury services, our capital markets division, wealth management, and insurance. Those 5 segments are supported by a few functional groups like HR, finance, compliance, as well as technology. We have a technology group. Interesting fact, outside of the government of Canada, RBC is actually one of the largest employers of technology professionals in Canada. So, you know, for everybody who is a technology professional out there on the call today, that was a message for you. And that area is continually growing. So there's always a lot of opportunities out there for everyone. Just a couple of the other accolades we've received. You know, we're considered by LinkedIn, you know, one of the top companies where people want to work. You know, we're considered one of the top 100 employers in Canada. And, you know, we've won JD Power Awards for customer service. And our brand is very strong. We are considered one of the most valuable brands in Canada as well. All right, so next slide, please. All right, perfect. So, you know, just want to give you a little sense of who we are in terms of, you know, our commitment to diversity and inclusion. As I mentioned before, we have 16 million plus clients, and we serve our clients in over 200 languages, including American Sign Language. So even for our deaf clients, we do provide services for them. 45% of our executives are women, and 35% of our workforce are visible minorities. Within the organization, we have employee resource groups. So this really helps to drive that inclusive culture. These groups support women, visible minorities, newcomers to Canada. There's one for our LGBTQ plus employees, persons with disabilities, as well as Indigenous peoples of Canada, veterans, etc., and other groups globally. All right, next slide, please. All right, now delving in further into the whole area of newcomers to Canada, you know, again, just kind of highlighting our commitment to this particular talent group. You know, so the Government of Canada, in collaboration with Hire Immigrants Ottawa, awarded RBC with a 2019 Employer Award for newcomers. We really believe in the whole concept about hiring from the community to serve the community. So as the community becomes much more diverse, our employee base will match that because we want to be reflective of the communities we serve. And we are currently the largest host of Career Edge interns. You know, and I'm assuming a lot of you know about Career Edge, but if you don't, after this event, you can certainly Google search Career Edge online, where we provide, you know, 6-month contracts or 12-month contracts in various positions across the organization, especially for newcomers to Canada. It's a great way to launch a career in Canada, get your foot in the door at a great organization, and it could lead to a lot of opportunities for you. Sometimes I know some candidates get converted to full-time before their contract is up, or their contract might get extended if they're working on a particular project that is going on. And at the very least, you get the opportunity to network, all right, with some great leaders within the bank. So between 2017 to 2019, you know, we hosted or participated in over 30 events, workshops, job fairs, supporting over 4,000 newcomers to Canada. All right, next slide, please. Just to give you a sense of, you know, our recruiter base. So, you know, want to sort of help to allay the fears that, you know, when you submit your resume, the person receiving the resume might not fully appreciate sort of some of the nuances that might come with your resume in terms of your experiences around the world and stuff like that. 42% of our recruiters across Canada are visible minorities, and within the Toronto region itself, 48%. So that's a good half of our recruitment base are visible minorities. It's just an interesting fact to note that, the Canadian visible minority workforce is in total 28%. So we are very much way above that rate in terms of the recruitment base and the organization as a whole, because as I mentioned, about 35% of our workforce is visible minorities. Again, speaking to our commitment to hire from the community to serve the community. All right, next slide, please. And then this is another example of how we're really taking a strategic approach towards the newcomer community. So we have actually started to build out physical locations, so like our branches. We have a few branches that are specifically designed to help newcomers to Canada. They are called RBC meeting places. And apart from items related to banking in general, we do provide a lot of workshops and advice around settling in a new country, preparing your resume, getting job ready, and stuff like that. So again, another example of how deep our commitment goes. All right, next slide, please. All right, so now let's get into what the presentation is really about today. And we're going to talk about interviewing. All right, now, you've applied for a job, we've reviewed your resume, you've been contacted for an interview. The preparation process should start before the actual interview. Once you get that call, we certainly encourage you to do a lot of research about the role, about the company as a whole. And if you get the details about the hiring team, we certainly encourage you to, do some research on the hiring team. LinkedIn is your friend, so I hope everyone has a up-to-date LinkedIn profile. Now, the importance of this research really comes into play when you get into the interview and you're doing interactions with the interviewer. It can help you answer questions much more in depth, but also gives you an opportunity to build questions that you can ask back to the recruiter or interviewer, if it's a manager, during the interview process. And I'll get to that a little later in terms of you asking questions. Now, it's just a couple tips here. Sorry, there's another point there. In terms of preparing directions and logistics, now you might get called to an interview at a location that you are unfamiliar with. Again, I would encourage you to, do a Google search of the address of the location and figure out how to get there. I know it might sound trivial, but we don't want you on the day to be panicking, in terms of getting to the location. And two, we are located in several buildings within the city. So, you don't want to go to the wrong location and then you end up being late and then you get flustered for your interview. So preparing directions and just the logistics, it's always a good thing to do. Also, you do not want to, be mindful of the time. So if you have an interview for 1 o'clock, you don't want to get there at 12:30, because when you're too early, you can put pressure on the person who is interviewing you. So they're worried because you're outside sitting down, so they're flustering to finish their work early to come and see you. And it might just create a bad sort of interaction because everybody's sort of distracted, everybody's flustered. All right, what I used to do for myself, whenever I had an interview at a location, I would search for a coffee shop that's nearby. So I would come down early to the location, but I'll go to the coffee shop, just compose myself, maybe do some last minute research, maybe have a cup of coffee just to calm down a little bit. And then maybe 10, 15 minutes before the interview, I then would go into the building and go up to the floor for my interview so that you are just on time. Sorry about that. All right, so that's just something to think about. Just a reminder, now I know it's something that's not spoken about very often, but if you are someone with a disability, we certainly encourage you, if you require some sort of accommodation, to please let us know beforehand, and we can provide that accommodation for you. All right, so if you're hearing impaired, for example, and you need an interpreter, we will provide an interpreter for you. All right, so just a fact to know. You can go to the next slide, please. Perfect. All right, just a couple housekeeping items. You know, when you go to the interview, please dress professionally and appropriately. Pay attention to your personal hygiene. Avoid wearing too much makeup or jewelry. You don't want to be doing anything that will distract from you or take attention away from what you're saying. And do not wear perfume or cologne. There are some people who are seriously allergic. You know, where I work, for example, on my floor, you're not allowed to wear perfume or cologne, all right? Because some people can be badly affected by that. All right, next slide. All right. Now that we're prepared, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the types of interviews that are very common with us. The one that most people will get, it's in the first round of interviews, is the phone interview. Just some tips to take into consideration. Make sure you have a clear phone line and that you are in a quiet space to take the call. All right. I just observed an incident a couple of days ago with one of my other recruiters. They had called someone, set up an interview time beforehand. When they called for the interview, they realized the person was on the bus taking the phone call. Now, that did not make for a good interview because there was a lot of distracting noise in the background, a lot of talking, laughing, the ringing of bells and stuff like that. Needless to say, that person did not move forward, all right, because they weren't able to answer the questions effectively, and it was difficult for the recruiter to hear. Another tip, you want to prepare for a phone interview like it's an in-person interview. Some people believe that a phone interview, oh yeah, probably just want to get to know me a little more. No, some of the questions could be very in-depth, so it's very important that you prepare for a phone interview like it's an in-person interview. And when you're talking on the phone, you want to make sure that you have a confident tone in your voice. Believe it or not, smiling actually helps in terms of how your words are projected. It actually changes the intonation on your voice. So it shows that, you know, you want to appear more engaged and responsive to the questions being asked. Okay, you don't, when you're in a phone interview, you know, too much dead silence or answering, yes, no, okay, and then silence, it does not make for a good interview. Because now there's no visual cues for the recruiter, so they might start to get some negative assumptions in terms of, you know, is this person really interested in the job? Are they even listening? So you just want to be mindful about how you respond. Video interviews, it's something that we have been using more and more recently. It isn't used across the board as of yet. Mainly with our student recruitment, we use it, but it's just something I like to just bring up here as well. You know, well, there'll be instructions in terms of how to set up the entire interview process with the video. You want to dress like it's an in-person interview. So remember, somebody's seeing you on camera. Even though it might be the waist up, you want to make sure and look professional, and your body language, your posture should be, you know, very much aligned to being someone who is attentive to what is being said. And your background, you also want to avoid having a messy or distracting background. Again, you want to avoid anything that will distract from the story that you are trying to tell in your interview. Then there's the in-person interview. Some of the same tips that applied before, but just be mindful. You want to come across professional. You want to shake hands when you meet the person. Shake hands and make eye contact. It is considered professional here, and in some other countries, eye contact might not be a primary thing to do, but here it is. And again, you want to be conscious of your body language. So sometimes, when we sit down across from someone, if you get too comfortable, sometimes the tendency might be to slouch in the chair and sort of, become distracted. Be mindful of your body language. Again, you want to show that you are sort of attentive all the time. All right, next slide, please, Sonia. All right, so let's talk about the type of questions that may come up. In every interview, usually starts off with sort of standard questions, and I gave a few examples here. It's tell me about yourself, and this is really related to your career, your background, history, and stuff like that. What are your 3 strengths? Why should RBC hire you, and what attracted you to the role? Now, these are questions you should have an answer to very easily. You should know them like the back of your hand. There's not much tricking here with these questions. They may sound differently when they are asked, but these are usually questions that are being asked. Just some tips around this. Practice answers to these questions regularly before the interview. And if it's asked in the phone interview, don't think it will not come up again in an in-person interview. You should be prepared to answer these questions at every round of interview, because you're always going to be meeting somebody new. They might not have been given the background, and it's just a way that they start the whole interview process. So you just want to be mindful of that. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, perfect. So moving on, once we've passed the sort of initial standard interview questions, we get into the real meaty type of questions, and that's your behavioral questions. And as it says here, this is where they want you to describe scenarios from your work, your volunteer, or some sort of other life experience. All right, so you've got to be able and ready to answer these types of questions. Usually you will get a hint that these questions are coming when you hear the recruiter or the manager. They may say, okay, so tell me about a time. That's usually a cue that you're going to get into the behavioral questions. And I gave some examples here. So tell me about a time that you went above and beyond to help a customer. Tell me about the time you worked effectively under pressure, you made a mistake, and how did you handle it? Now, I'd like to pause on this one particular question around the mistake and how you handle it. This is the type of question related to maybe a weakness that you may have. Now, I myself, in the past, used to be hesitant around that weakness question, because I'm like, who wants to talk about their weakness? But the way it's framed here now, and the way that it is sort of reframed that question now, it's, they say a mistake and how did you handle it? The recruiter, the listener, the manager, they're trying to see how you worked through a problem. All right, so they want to hear the good story at the end of it. But it's really looking at your thought process in how you got to your final solution, whatever the particular issue was. So just be mindful of that. And again, an example, tell me what time you reached a personal goal and how did you do it? Just some tips in this area. If the question is asked and you're not sure what was asked, don't hesitate to ask for specifics. Ask them to maybe rephrase the question. We totally understand that you will not be looked on negatively for asking for more specifics or just to clarify. Additionally, the temptation I've seen with some candidates, they hear the question and they start to just rattle off an answer. This could be dangerous. if you have the answer on the top of your head, that's great. But sometimes people just start answering a question and they end up answering a question that was not asked. So now, this is your listening skills we are looking at. So again, just be mindful of that. It's okay to take a few seconds, just kind of compose yourself and then respond. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So still sticking with the behavioral questions, this is sort of a way that you can answer these questions. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with something called the STAR approach. And we'll go through it here briefly, but this is something that you can sort of Google as well going forward. They'll have more information online. So the STAR approach, basically it's situation, task, action, results. All right, situation, you're sort of given the context in which you perform, the task, what did you do to complete the task, and that's the action as well. And then your results, what was the outcome? And I'll explain it with this example here that I like to use. So the question is, tell me about the time you had to complete a task under a tight deadline. Describe the situation and explain how you handled it. Now, this is how this answer was given. While I typically like to plan my work out in stages and complete it piece by piece, I can also achieve strong work under a tight deadline. So right away, this candidate is sort of grounding the question by actually rephrasing the question as part of his answer. So now he goes in the situation. So once at the former company, an employee left days before a big project of his was due. The task, I was asked to take it over with only a few days to learn about and complete the project. Now, in those two sentences right there, the candidate is drawing the interviewer into the story. So now you have the attention of the recruiter, because now I want to know, okay, this was a crazy situation. How did you handle it? So you have the attention of the recruiter. Now your action. I created a task force and delegated work. All right, so we're seeing here the problem solving starting to take place, how he's figuring it out. And the results, we all completed the assignment with 1 day to spare. Now, having numerical samples in your answer is very good. It really helps to ground your answer. So tell me you achieve a goal with a day to spare. That tells me, wow, this person knows how to do things on time, or even on earlier time, you can save money and stuff like that. So having numbers to ground your answer will only add value for you. And then they finish off, I think I tend to thrive under tight deadlines. Again, sort of reiterating the question that was asked. So this was a model example of how you respond to questions that may come up. All right. Now, again, behavioral questions, you can find tons of them online. And so again, Google is your friend. Or again, if you go to ACCES, and you're working with a coach, they can certainly go through samples with you as well. All right, Sonia, next slide, please. Okay, so after the behavioral questions are done, provided that there's a little time left, the recruiter manager who is new, they might take it now. So they'll be like, so that's what it means. From me, do you have any questions for you to? Under no circumstances should you not have a question to ask. I like this part of the interview because, even in instances where you feel like the interview did not go the best, it is an opportunity to redeem yourself if you can ask some really smart questions. And now this brings me back to my first slide where I was talking about preparation. If you did your research into the company or the team or similar projects that the bank is working on, you can actually frame some really good questions, which would make the manager or the interviewer feel like, wow, this person is like they're part of the team already, right? So I gave a couple samples here. These are some more generic ones. that you can ask the interviewer. So, these are a little personal. So it's like, can you tell me what you like about working at the RBC? What was your career journey here? These questions are good because it gives the interviewer a chance to really share their perspectives. And you're also learning, right? You're trying to see if the bank is a good fit for you. So hearing from somebody who is working here could also be valuable. And then I had the next one here, what are the next steps, timelines in this recruitment process? Now, this is the last question that you could ask literally at the end of an interview. I suggest that you don't use this as your first question to ask. This is almost by the way type question, all right? Usually the recruiter or the interviewer will inform you of the next steps, but you can certainly weave it into the conversation if it doesn't come up. All right, next question. Right, so the interview is finished, you have left the building, but you are not finished as yet. All right, it's very important that after an interview, you should follow up with the interviewers within 24 hours. And it's simply sending a short email, a thank you note. Thank you for seeing me. I really appreciated hearing about, learning more about the RBC. Again, I just want to reiterate that I believe I would be a good fit for this role because of X, Y, Z. It should not be more than 2-3 lines. You are not writing an essay. You want to keep it simple and brief, but the goal here is to remain memorable in the minds of the interviewer. They may be interviewing several people for the job, but they will remember the ones who stood out to them. If 3-4 people are really strong and the recruiter has to decide, oh, who should I choose? It may be the one who sent a good follow-up message that may tip the scales in your favor. All right, so it's just something to be mindful of. All right, and the last, I think, next slide, please. All right, perfect. So, this is just kind of like a extra slide just to remind you, the interview goes well, you were selected for the role. Then the recruiter will call you with the offer. They will discuss salary and benefits. They will initiate background checks. This is where, they might check references. They might do a credit, criminal background check as well. And that all that is done behind the scenes. If you require workplace accommodation, again, if you have a disability and you need some sort of accommodation to be successful on the job, this is an opportunity for you to let the recruiter know, and we will start to get those things in place for you. And then we'll also share some first day details with you. It's like, okay, this is the building you're coming to, this is the floor you're coming to, this is who is going to meet you on the first day, and other relevant information that you will need to really get things going for yourself. All right, and that's it. The interview process is done, and then you were successful. So I think we'll open it up to questions now. So if you have any questions, I think you just put it into the chat area, and then Sonia will let me know. Sonia?
Yes, thank you, Ron. Great presentation. You actually answered a lot of questions that people would have. So please type your questions into the Q&A tab on your, I guess there's a bar over there and it says Q&A. Type your questions in there. We will not be taking the ones that you're typing in the chat. So to get started, we've got our first question here from Papaya. Wants to know, is it important to bring a resume at an interview? What if you forget to bring it? I'm just looking at. Okay, so what do you need to bring? So is it important to bring your resume? And what happens if you forget to bring your resume?
All right, no, good question. Now, usually, the person who's interviewing you will have a copy of the resume. Having said that, though, I still encourage candidates to walk with 1 or 2 copies of their resume with them. You never know what will happen on the day, right? So it's good just as a backup. Just have it there. You know, always be prepared. That's my philosophy. Always be prepared. So I would still say, if you can, please have 1 or 2 copies of your resume available at all times.
Perfect, thank you. And when you change industries, how do you manage that on your resume? Let's say if you have more than a year gap in your resume.
So sorry, so we're talking about gap, or we're talking about changing from one industry to another?
I guess you can answer both.
Sure. So, well, again, when you're changing from one industry to another, it's really up to you to really demonstrate in your resume how your skills are transferable from one to the next. All right. So, you know, it doesn't matter the industry. I'll give a simple example. I know it might be more complex for other scenarios, but you know, somebody who was, let's say, working in a retail fashion store, for example, and they're coming into banking to do sales and service in banking. As much as it's a different industry, different products you're selling, some of the basic tenets of those 2 businesses are very similar in terms of building relationships with clients, providing advice to clients, listening to clients, working in a team. These are the story points that you want to be able to merge into your resume to tell us why you would be a good fit for the role. So, you know, always try to find transferable skills that you can weave that story in your resume. Now, in terms of a gap, now I'm assuming here we're talking a gap in terms of your transition from your old country to the new country. So let's say, you know, you came here in January 2019, and you just didn't get a job. So now it's 2020. Again, we work with a lot of newcomers. When we see that your last job was from another country, most of our recruiters understand what this is. We understand the transition period could be a little difficult in terms of getting a job. So it's not too much of an issue for us. Now, if you have a several-year gap, then the conversation might be a little different. Now, I spoke to a newcomer yesterday, and she was telling me, for example, she was off because she was a new mom, right? So she took some years off to take care of her children, and it's okay. We've seen resumes where people will just enter a line, you know, away from work, you know, was a new mom, to be a new mom or something like that, and they just put the dates so that they were away. It is totally understandable. We see people with those kind of gaps all the time, and there's a logical story behind it. So, yeah, so that's fine as well. I hope I answered that question effectively.
Thank you, Ron. Next question is, do hiring managers reply after the thank you note? Like you know, you send a thank you follow-up email, and what does it mean when they don't reply?
So some managers do reply, but yeah, if they do not reply, please do not take anything negative away from that. All right, I don't want you to lose confidence. It could be that manager received tons of emails on a daily basis. They probably read it, but they just could not get back to it. All right. Remember, this is a nice to have item to do. Okay. This is not something that will make or break your chances. The interview was still the main course of the whole process. So please do not take anything negative away if you do not get a reply. It's not always that they do reply.
Thank you. Another question here is, at what point do you have to provide your reference checks?
That's at the end. Once you've been given the offer, they will, the recruiter or the team that's doing the review, final, like the background reviews, they may reach out to you asking for that. You do not have to give us your references in your resume. All right, save space on your resume for other things. Do not put your references on the resume, please.
Thank you. And during an interview, when asked about salary expectations, what are you supposed to say? A higher amount, or like how would you know what the right answer is?
So for the most part, again, it's very rare that I have come across this. They will sort of outline they will tell you up front what the salary is for that particular role. In some instances, there might be some room for negotiation, but you know, I can't tell you what that number is. But you don't want to be too far away from what they sort of gave you initially. All right. So that's a question. It depends. It's really a situation by situation thing.
Thank you. Okay, so if someone is new in the field and they want to present themselves as, you know, being competitive, and they've, how do you I guess stand out in with other candidates when you're very new to the field? Like, what can you bring to the table?
Well, I know it's just a question asked online, but it's sort of begs for a follow-up. You know, when we say new to the field, what do we mean? Like, new to banking, again, I can't stress this enough. You know, if there's transferable skills that you can show, you want to make sure and articulate that on your resume. The resume. It is absolutely vital. That is the first introduction that the recruiter will have to you. So it's very important that you tell a story effectively with your resume and a cover letter, if you're so inclined, to really explain to us, you know, what value you bring to the role. I'll give this, and I'll say this as well. Now, if you're applying to a role where, you know, one of the must-haves, look at the must-haves for the section, for the role. You know, if you're applying to like a senior role where they're expecting you to have tons of experience in that particular area, but you have no experience at all, you know, then competition-wise, you will be at a disadvantage. Don't think you can move from 0 to 100 in one stroke. Sometimes it might be taking sort of a junior role, building up that experience, then moving up.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about Career Edge and RBC?
Sure. So Career Edge, again, as I sort of briefly mentioned earlier, it is a nonprofit organization that helps newcomers to Canada, as well as persons with disabilities, to get contract roles. So RBC, let's say, for example, in one of our capital markets groups, for example. So the capital markets group may have a project that they're working on. They need somebody to come in for 6 months. They will create a role, and then we would post that role on Career Edge's online job board, looking for candidates. Now, roles posted on that job board do not show up on our regular open job board. What that means is, and which is an advantage for you, the pool of candidates is much smaller on Career Edge's website because you're only competing with a small batch of people. So the greater the possibility for your resume to reach a manager's desk for review and potential invitation for an interview. These roles, it's supposed to help give you some, you know, experience, exposure ideally in a field that you know best. And then once you're in, there's an opportunity, you put your best foot forward. And sometimes, as I mentioned, those contracts could get extended. People get converted to full-time. At the very least, you get the opportunity to network with other senior RBCers, and your resume now has some more depth, because now you could leave saying, worked at the RBC. Even though you were hired through the Career Edge program, you work at RBC Bank for 6 months working on a particular project.
And how would you talk about your weaknesses during an interview?
Again, like I mentioned, you can mention if it does come up. You want to mention the weakness, but also tell me how you work through it. Yeah. You can say, in my early on in my career, in my previous role, public speaking was not one of my strongest suits. But it is something I really wanted to work on. So I joined Toastmasters, and whenever the opportunity came up in work to do presentations in front of a small audience, I always took advantage of those opportunities. It helped to build my confidence, and over time, I was able to speak to bigger and bigger audiences, and now I am pretty good at public speaking. So we started off talking about that shortcoming we thought we might have had, but the majority, the 80% of the conversation is me working through it and ending up on the other side of it. How I worked through that sort of situation.
Thank you. What is involved in a background check, especially if the person is new to Canada and doesn't have any other previous employers in Canada? How can all this information be verified for this person?
So in terms of like references, sometimes you'll be surprised. So we're checking your education and your references and stuff like that. We're pretty good at this. We work in 37 countries, so our recruitment and background checking team is pretty well developed. We do check back references in different areas around the world. We can follow up with education background as well. In terms of, yes, the credit check, yes, you might not have any credit here. It's really just checking to see if there was any fraud incidents on your record. So that usually comes back pretty clear. So don't worry, it's nothing in depth per se. We're not really looking for your finances. We just check to see if any fraud item was added to your credits check since moving to Canada.
Thank you. Resumes are scanned within seconds. How long does the interviewer take to make up their mind after looking at a resume?
So always assume initial reviews of resumes will be maybe 15, 30 seconds. You really have to wow the recruiter on that first half of the first page of your resume. You want to encourage them to pause and continue reading. Having said that, though, there's certainly a process. So the first stage of review, it's that initial scan. We're looking for the main points. Your resume is then moved to a smaller bucket of resumes, and then they go a little further in depth. These are resumes. Okay, I want to take a second look at them, and then it keeps getting whittled down to smaller and smaller groups. So initial review is 30 seconds, but if your resume is going through the process, it actually gets reviewed several times, much more and more in depth, and then it goes to a manager who also does their own in-depth review. So initially it's 30 seconds, but it could really go on much longer.
Thank you. For a new immigrant, is it essential to have Canadian experience to be considered for a job?
My broad answer is no. I know there's a lot of fear out there around this whole issue around Canadian experience. Again, as the country becomes more diverse and, recruiters are much more accustomed, and we're seeing a lot of newcomers all the time, from our experience, we have a lot of newcomers who work with us, and their product output is as good as or equal to anything else that anybody puts out. Having said that, though, there might be a minute amount of jobs that might require that Canadian exposure. For example, there might be some compliance jobs or some legal jobs where an in-depth understanding of Canadian law, Canadian norms is critical to be successful in that role. But by and large, for most roles, the Canadian experience is quickly going the way of just being a myth. If you're doing finance, a CFA or CPA from Australia, from some country in Africa, anywhere around the world is a CFA and a CPA here. If you are a computer person and you can do coding in your country, it's the same coding that's done here. So that is not as big an issue as many candidates think it is, that Canadian experience.
Thank you. When an interviewer asks, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are they really looking for? What's the best way to answer that question?
Well, again, that could go many ways, depending on the role, right? Ideally, you want to say, I still see myself with the company. I want to be growing with the company. Maybe I want to be in a more senior position with the company. We're looking to see if this person is interested in a career or just looking for a quick job. And we want to know that this person is willing to continuously learn and grow. Those, I think, are some of the broader things that they look for.
Thank you. And what kind of questions can a candidate ask to the employer to understand what type of work environment to expect?
Well, that person is they actually have that question. They already have the answer in that question that is asked. And maybe it is just to reframe it, right? So it's like, it could be just asking the person, how would you describe the culture here at the RBC or any organization? Because you're trying to get a sense of how it is to work there. So they might say, the culture here is very collaborative. We work a lot in teams. We are very goal-oriented, right? It could vary depending on departments, but I'm just giving you some examples.
Thank you. Let's say you've had an interview and the employer says, we will follow up with you in the next 2 weeks. Is it a good idea to follow up before the 2 weeks or wait till the 2 weeks are done?
You know what, if they told you, they gave you a time frame within 2 weeks, I would suggest just waiting it out, till the end, because chances are they will get back in touch with you. If not, just, after 2 weeks, you just want to reach out. We met 2 weeks ago. I know there was, the suggestion that I would get a follow-up. I didn't receive anything, so I just wanted to know what's potential next steps or something like that. Yeah, so I would suggest waiting.
Can you give some tips on how to remain calm in an interview? Very nerve-wracking. A lot of people are anxious. What's the best way to overcome all of that? For some people, it could be their very first interview or very first interview in a new country. Lots of different aspects.
Yeah. Now, first of all, know that our recruiters or managers understand that an interview can be a very nerve-wracking experience. All right, so they are very mindful of that. But maybe I'll go back, as one example, I'll go back to what I was mentioning earlier in terms of you preparing for your interview. You don't want to, you're going to an interview, go to the location earlier, near the location earlier. find a coffee shop, something, a quiet space just to calm yourself. All right. Take a deep breath. You know, have something to eat. Make sure you eat before you come to the interview. And just kind of try to calm yourself as much as possible. When you go into the interview, you know, what has worked for me in the past, you know, it really starts off at that introduction. When you meet the person, you shake their hand, just that little walk to the interview room, you know, it might be an opportunity to just kind of start up a conversation. You know, ask how the day is going and stuff like that, you know, just to kind of set the mood. These things tend to spill into the actual interview. You want to set the tone early. And just, you know, as much as possible, just take deep breaths, listen to the questions being asked, and just take your time and answer as appropriate as possible.
Thank you. Is it a good idea to approach the hiring manager who's going to be interviewing you before the interview or after the interview on LinkedIn?
So I like the after part. Usually, you know, you met the person, so you've already had that kind of FaceTime with them. And, you know, sometimes when you're leaving the interview, you know, you're saying thank you, you may say, hey, do you have a LinkedIn? Can I maybe add you to my friends or my, I don't know what's the word, you know, my contacts on LinkedIn. Usually managers are pretty fine with that. They say, definitely, sure, go ahead, not a problem. Before, you can certainly add the person. Some people will respond automatically. Some people might not. And again, please don't take anything negative away if somebody doesn't add you back right away. I can tell you for myself, tons of people add me all the time. I am sometimes so overwhelmed that I don't get back to everyone, or I don't add everyone quickly. But yeah, my overall suggestion is usually I would wait till after.
Thank you. All right, so I guess we can do a few more questions. Okay, so you know, you said that like eye contact is important. So if the interviewer is not keeping eye contact with you, does that mean they're not interested?
No. There could be several things. Now, again, I don't know the scenario you're talking about. So sometimes a recruiter might move eye contact because they're probably making notes in the interview. Who knows, that person may also be a bit shy on the other end. You just focus on you, do your initial eye contact. If they lose eye contact during the interview, again, please just keep working through it and do what you need to do. Just stay respectful and don't panic.
Thank you. Just going over some questions already answered. Cover letters. How important are cover letters?
We like to consider the cover letter, think of the cover letter like a spare tire. Your resume will, at least at RBC, your resume is your primary marketing tool for yourself. However, a cover letter can be that little extra oomph that you need. I'll give you a situation. So, you know, we've had situations where, you know, a recruiter or manager is struggling. They have two great candidates, and they may be struggling to decide, okay, which one to move forward with. If they look at both resumes and they look pretty good, pretty strong, pretty similar, they may look at a cover letter where the candidate would have had an opportunity to sort of expand in paragraph form what they're trying to talk about. In those instances, the cover letter helps you, but it is not something that is the main thing anymore in all cases. But I would encourage you, if you can, have a cover letter.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I do apologize to everyone, but this is all the time we have today to answer your questions. We will have another RBC webinar coming up. I'll tell you in a few moments. But Ron, before I move forward, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, again, I know, just a general comment. Again, I know many of you are on this journey. Some of you might have just arrived. Some of you probably haven't arrived as yet. Some of you might be here for a few months. Do not stress out too much. Stay positive throughout this process. Job searching is a job unto itself. We totally understand. We totally get it. I know there'll come a time where you might feel a lot of despair, but you've got to keep moving on. Additionally, take advantage of opportunities, organizations like ACCESS, Career Edge, other networking opportunities public networking opportunities that may present itself. Take advantage of that. The process of getting a job is not a straight line. It can be a process that goes up and down in all different directions. So please stay positive.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron. We're very happy to have you here. I hope we can get you to come back soon. And again, if anyone has any more questions related to interviews, resumes, networking, anything to do with your job search, go to our website, click on ACCESS, and you can go to any of these tiles and get more information. We have past webinars over there as well. We also have past RBC specific webinars as well. So you can check those out. Our next RBC webinar is with Vivian, and it's a panel discussion featuring newcomers who are now working at RBC, and you can see the job titles that they have now. You can look them up on LinkedIn, and they will be talking about how they started their careers at RBC. And our next webinar that's coming up is next week, February 12th on, oh, there's a big typo there. And on Wednesday, it's our CPA information session. So if any one of you are are interested in getting your CPA, please attend the session. You do not have to have an accounting background for this. For people who are approved for immigration to Canada and you have your COPRs, you could be eligible for our Canadian Employment Connections program. So if you belong to any of these sectors, email cec@accessemployment.ca and you can see if you're eligible for the program or not. And add us on Instagram. We are very active on our social media, newly on Instagram. So if you want to know what's happening at ACCESS, whether it's online, it's in-house, or at another community service partner, you can add us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Thank you so much today for attending the webinar. And Ron, a very big thank you for coming in and doing the workshop. We had a great attendance. We had lots of questions, and I'm sorry again that we weren't able to answer all of them, but we will have another RBC session. So hold your questions and bring them on Monday. So thank you again, everyone. And thank you very much, Ron.
Thank you, Sonia. Looking forward to doing this again with you sometime.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.